I want to tell a story about how I perceive forgetting and remembering today's society. I'll be using two essays, one from Nietzsche and the other one from Deleuze. I'll try to sketch out how I think that forgetting has erased remembering as the dominant modus operandi of society. I'll start off by telling a personal story from my grandfather. I come from Croatia, which is a small country in the Balkans, which was formerly part of Yugoslavia. In the early 80s, my granddad was mayor of Zadar, which is one of the bigger cities on the Adriatic coast. At that time, Tito was still president of Yugoslavia, that is, dictator, and whatever you might think of his politics, he was one of the greatest statesmen of the 20th century, playing the west of the east and modernizing a whole region of Europe in just a couple of decades. One time Tito came to Zadar, and my grandfather accommodated him. They were on the balcony and small talking. Tito, being from Zagorje, which is a more mountainous region in the inland part of Croatia, said, "Yeah, this is all nice, looking at the Zadar archipelago, but have you seen the beauty of Zagorje?" To which my granddad said, "Yes, Zagorje is like a well put together room that is beautifully designed. But," pointing to the view of the islands and the sea, this, this is maybe a little less orderly and pretty, but there's no fourth wall here. Here, the horizons are always open."
Stare priče slušat znam, kad se čača rodija, ribu moru on je kralj, i svu mater ribi da. Sad je čača čovjek star, pisme mora pivat sam, uvijek iste riči zna, reći prije spavanja.
Nietzsche, in his essay on the uses and disadvantages of history, published in 1874, tells the story of memory, that is, of remembering and forgetting. Writing in a time when the study of history was being institutionalized, as well as a period where philosophy was trying its hand at putting meaning into the study of history. While the broader themes of the essay is about living historically, describing the ways in which cultures, nations take relation to their history, it has a classic Nietzschean twist of being written for the individual and his way of life as well. He begins the essay by describing: "Consider the cattle, gazing as they pass you by. They do not know what is meant by yesterday or today. They leap about, eat, rest, digest, leap about again, and so from morn till night, from day to day, fettered to the moment and its pleasure or displeasure, thus neither melancholy nor bored. This is a hard sight for man to see, for, though he thinks himself better than the animals, because he is human, he cannot help envying them in their happiness. What they have, a life neither bored nor painful, is precisely what he wants, yet he cannot have it, because he refuses to be like an animal. A human being may well ask the animal, 'Why do you not speak to me of your happiness, but only stand there and gaze at me?' The animal would like to answer and say, 'The reason is, I always forget what I was going to say.'" He laments how humans can get so caught up in the past that they stay trapped in it, juxtaposing it with the human plastic power of adapting, forgetting, and healing. Describing how it is possible to live almost without memory, and to live happily moreover, but that it is altogether impossible to live without forgetting, equating too much remembering with that which can be harmful or ultimately fatal to a living thing, being that a person, a people, or a culture. Reading the text, it can be easily seen that his main target of analysis was how and why to do away with too much memory, so that history can serve life, and not the other way around. Although we can see many examples in our current time of countries, cultures, and individuals not being able to go beyond their past, being trapped in it, the problem I see growing today is actually not being able to store memory. That is, that history can't serve life because we are forgetting how to remember. Nietzsche then takes up the theme of horizons. And this is a universal law. A living thing can be healthy, strong, and fruitful only when bounded by a horizon. if it is incapable of drawing a horizon around itself, and at the same time too self-centered to enclose its own view in that of another, it will pine away slowly or hasten to its timely end. Saying how cheerfulness, good conscience, the joyful deed, and confidence in the future all rest upon the ability and instinct of a person or a culture to know when to remember and when to forget, that is, the ability to make and sustain a horizon. First of all, there is an observation that everybody must have made. A man's historical sense and knowledge can be very limited, his horizon as narrow as that of a dweller in the Alps. All his judgments may involve injustice, and falsely suppose that all of his experiences are original to him. Yet, in spite of this injustice and error, he will nonetheless stand there in superlative health and vigor, a joy to all who see him, while close beside him a man far more just and instructed than he sickens and collapses, because the lines of his horizons are always restlessly changing, because he can no longer extradite himself from the delicate net of his judiciousness and truth for a simple act of will and desire. This summer, I had to make the decision of leaving Croatia to go study to Germany. I had doubts, fears, and a lot of thoughts about it, as one does. Talking to my father about it, he gave me the perspective of his youth. Back then, in the former communist Yugoslavia, the horizons of a common young man were that of finishing high school, going to the army for a year or two, where you would live in a village in the middle of nowhere, and then, if you had some luck and an ambition, you would go to college, after which you would work for a socialist government-run firm. When my doubts reached a point where I was willing to give up on the idea of going studying abroad, it would be a no-brainer for him. I see this as an ample metaphor for the change that the social modus operandi has undertaken. While I'm talking about special country, a particular regime, as well as a region of the world, I see parallels in the broader themes of the shift from modernism to postmodernism, of factory and production capitalism to information and consumption capitalism. Deleuze, a famous postmodern French philosopher, wrote an essay, Postscript, on the societies of control, where he in a few pages lays out his thoughts about the evolution of subjugation in our societies. Foucault located the disciplinary society in the 18th and 19th centuries. They reached their height at the onset of the 20th century. They initiate organization of vast spaces of enclosure. The individual never ceases passing from one enclosed environment to another, each having its own laws. First, the family, then the school. You are no longer in your family. Then the barracks. You are no longer in school. Then the factory. From time to time the hospital, possibly the prison, the preeminent instance of an enclosed environment. It's the prison that serves as the analogical model. At the sight of some laborers, the heroine of Rossellini's Europa 51 could exclaim, "I thought I was seeing convicts." He explains how the mechanisms of subjugation through discipline changed to those of control, as they became antiquated for the ever-changing societies. Yet he never claimed that they went away, but rather that they could coexist, going from enclosed spaces of discipline to an ever-present process of control. In the disciplinary societies, one is always starting again, from school to the barracks, from the barracks to the factory, while in the society's control, one is never finished with anything. In the trial, Kafka, who already placed himself at the pivotal point between the two types of social formations, described the most fearsome of judicial forms, the apparent acquittal of disciplinary societies between two incarcerations, and the limitless postponement of the society's control in continuous variation. Stating further on in the text, perhaps it is money that expresses the distinction between the two societies the best, since discipline always referred back to minted money that locks gold as its numerical standard, while control relates to floating rates of exchange, modulated according to a rate established by a set of standard currencies. The old monetary mole is the animal of the spaces of enclosure, but the serpent is that of the society's control. We have passed from one animal to another, from the mole to the serpent, in the system under which we live, but also in the manner of living and relating to others. The disciplinary man was a discontinuous producer of energy, but the man of control is undulatory in orbit in a continuous network. In my opinion, this is the reason why Eastern philosophies, such as Buddhism, have an ample reach in contemporary Western societies. Not going into the validity of them, their more transient approach to concepts and perception is something that fits better with the current modus operandi, but can't be encapsulated in the same way in most of the Western philosophies and religions. My father's generation, in the former communist Yugoslavia, was one where the horizons were kept at arm's length. You weren't told you can be anybody, or anything. Nobody promised you the world. You knew your horizons, you knew where you were going and what was expected of you. You went from an enclosed space to another, as Deleuze says, always starting again. For our generation, it is an imperative to keep the horizons open as far as possible. You are always encouraged to go with the flow, as if nothing ever stops. To go with the flow would then be a self-fulfilling prophecy, the only reasonable answer to a world made to be in constant fluctuation, in a constant flow to a future not written. And, while change is the only constant in history as well in the future, the rate of change is unparalleled in human history. Zygmunt Bauman, a sociologist, in his book Fluid Modernity, posits that while the process of modernity always eradicated what was before, turning solid into fluid, the dream of modernity was always to make it solid again, just based upon other principles. Today, we live in constant flow, without any dream, promise, or calls for solidity. You are told that the possibilities are out there, that you don't know what's waiting for you, that you should be able to reimagine yourself, to do perpetual working on yourself, always going out of your comfort zone, taking the risk, finding new opportunities, and being able to be found by those opportunities. The most importantly, that you can't miss this opportunity. Today, we live in an age of self-actualization at gunpoint. No man will be a sailor who has contrivance enough to get himself into a jail, for being in a ship is being in jail, with the chance of being drowned. A man in jail has far more room, better food, and commonly better company. Samuel Johnson. Deleuze, at one point in the text, mentions the metaphor of surfing, as a way in which movement may be considered in the societies of control. Finding an occupation that may describe the exemplary way of living, I suggest an anecdote of a sailor. Often well-paying jobs that tear a person from their societal and physical surroundings, in constant state of transiency, never settling or committing to a port, only resting, with a home that is visited on occasion. I'm not saying that that's how all people live, or most of them, but I would posit that that's the poster child of the neoliberal era. A person ready to uproot himself or herself to another place, another job, another country, always on the search for a better opportunity, a new perspective, a new challenge. Always with our heads pointed to the horizon of possibilities. But looking at the open horizon, we start to dream and desire. Lacan, the most influential psychoanalyst after Freud, dedicated his life to interpreting Freud's system of thought through the linguistic and structuralist turn of the 60s. Lack is at the center of his system, that is, at the center of the human psychic apparatus. Something that can't be filled, as a mark of being subject destined to be in society through language. I will link a video to this topic. Lacan's psychoanalytic system provides an explanation to why no fulfilled desire can have the imagined pleasure associated with it. Because the yearning comes from an inherent lack in the subject, but it needs to be translated through the symbolic and social code to end up as desire. Positing the view of desire in such a way allows us to see how desire is a front, a mask, for a lot of things, just not that particular formulation of desire. It is often that when we desire, we crave to stop being a subject with lack, a vulnerable creature, or that we crave some more substantial needs, like acceptance, recognition, and love. Contemporary capitalism radicalizes the age-old saying that grass is always greener on the other side, perpetually pushing us towards desire to achieve more than the next person, more than ourselves yesterday. While there's certainly a human need for exploration, creativity, movement, self-actualization, and achieving, today's society turned that possibility into a command, stripping it of its human character and subjugating it to the neoliberal imperative. For my granddad, the open horizon symbolized a dream of freedom in a society of discipline and enclosed environments. For my father, it would be a no-brainer to follow and see where the horizon leads him. While for me, it symbolizes more than anything an anxiety, a trip I know I need to take, knowledge that solidity is but a dream and rest a luxury. The Nietzschean figure of the sickened man who collapses because he can't sustain a horizon would be a fitting allegory for today's world. Although depression, anxiety, and a slew of other mental problems can't be boiled down to a simple fact, I do think that this Nietzschean analysis holds a lot of truth to why we find it so hard to live with ourselves in today's world, always in battle to keep the horizon open. Going to the quote from the beginning of this chapter, of the sailor and the jail, the boat can be seen as the constant imperative to desire and dream, to keep the horizons open, making us prisoners to the very motion of desiring itself, while the jail, which is described more positively, might be read as the state of stillness and not setting sail, but being content. A friend of mine, Toma, said that this always changing state of transiency actually doesn't bring any change. For change to happen, one needs to have a start and an end, cutting off points. The state of always setting sail is more a repetition of the same, rather than a series of new journeys, leaving us in a constant state of limbo. He also added a feeling that this modus operandi commands you to be anything you want, just not being who you are. The very possibility of being able to set sail turns us into prisoners of our inherent lack, always pitting us against the walls of what is possible for a subject, destined to feel alienated from achieving a goal, for nothing but exhaustion as the motive, for nothing but the drive to go beyond and beyond, everything but accepting the lack inherent in us and finding meaning in stillness and peace. This always open horizon, this perpetual becoming, needs perpetual forgetting. Nothing can tie you to a place better than your history in it, the emotions and nostalgia associated with it. While the social operandi of the past amplified the remembering of your tradition, your country's past, your own past, and your horizons, the current neoliberal capitalism relies on forgetting, that is, rules by forgetting, so as not to get caught up in any particular port. In the vein of Marshall McLuhan's media theory, one can see how the most prevalent media form today is influencing the very fabric in which we perceive and move inside our social sphere. The internet and its content sites like YouTube, Netflix, and social media function in this very logic, the logic of infinity, flow, and forgetting, which then translates into the way we perceive ourselves as subjects, that is, how we are supposed to be. Going from video to video, from reel to reel, always in a state of flux and forgetting. The Watch Later playlist would then be a graveyard of your past paths of desire, laid to rest on the altar of perpetual movement, rarely to be opened up again.